Now, as we turn to a special moment in our program, it is with great delight that we present the Hannah C. Kinney Lifetime Achievement Award. This award has been established to honor Dr. Hannah Kinney's extraordinary contributions as a pioneering researcher, advocate, and leader in the field of SIDS research. Today, we are privileged to present this award to Dr. Hannah Kinney herself. Having her here with us is truly meaningful on so many levels. Dr. Kinney's groundbreaking work has transformed our understanding of sudden infant death syndrome and pediatric neuropathology. Her research has helped demystify SIDS, providing a roadmap for future studies on its causes and prevention. She has consistently pushed the boundaries of the field, embracing emerging technologies, omic-based approaches, for example, to advance our knowledge. Her contributions are vast and foundational. As a few small examples to walk through, she produced tissue-based evidence supporting and developing the serotonin hypothesis of SIDS. She's developed and expanded the triple risk model with Dr. Filiano, a framework that remains central to understanding SIDS today. She's highlighted the link between SIDS and socioeconomic factors, emphasizing the disparities that contribute to infant mortality. She has identified new biomarkers across the brain and in the hippocampus, pointing the field towards investigating seizures and their role in sudden unexpected deaths. She has advocated for standardized definitions and improved research methodology, ensuring consistency in SIDS and classification and the study design. And importantly, she co-founded the Roberts Program at Boston Children's Hospital along with Dr. Rick Goldstein, a program that continues to inspire and guide the work of the Isabel Davis Center. So on a personal note, I'm honored to have Hannah here today. She was one of my earliest mentors when I began my research in the SIDS field nearly 16 years ago as a postdoctoral fellow, and her guidance has been invaluable in shaping my career. We are incredibly fortunate that she has agreed to come out of semi-retirement, because Hannah never stops, to join us, not only to accept this award, but also to share her knowledge and insights today and tomorrow. She's going to be giving 2 talks. It is our hope that the Kinney Lifetime Achievement Award will become an annual tradition at this conference, celebrating those who dedicate their careers to advancing research and improving outcomes for children. And so with that, I invite Dr. Hannah Kinney to the stage to share with us some of her wisdom and extraordinary career with a lecture. And then after the lecture, we'll present her award. Started at the back.
Preview.
Okay. Let's be good. Yep.
Whoa. I am. Thank you so much, Russell. That was tremendous, and I'm so honored to be here today. I can't tell you what this award means to me. And to have it from Huda and from Russell and Savannah and your group at the Isabel Davis Center for Safe Children is just overwhelming for me, and I thank you so much. Now, Russell and Savannah take credit for this talk, because I am not going to give a talk on my research. Savannah and Russell asked me to give a talk about how I got into SIDS research and how I was inspired to follow a career in SIDS research. Friday afternoon, I'll talk about our research, the rabbit holes we went down, and the lessons learned. But this morning, I'd like to give a very personal reflections on the history of how I got involved in SIDS research. Now, I'd like to begin by thanking all the many people that have brought together this conference. Of course, there is Russell, and then there's Savannah. And when I asked Russell, how do I introduce Savannah and what do I say? What is her title? He said, amazing. So I'm going to leave it at that. And then I want to thank Huda for her vision and her support of this very meaningful center and bringing it off and helping. Of course, I want to thank the family. I know this is a tremendous thing for a family in so many levels. And the good that is going to come out of the center at Baylor and at Texas Children's is just amazing. So I want to thank you very much for this. And I'm really happy to talk to you after the meeting, after the conference, and get to know you better. I look forward to that. And then I'd like to thank the people that helped put the program together. And let's see, Yvette and Aileen, and also Liz and Julian. So I want to thank you all very much, and this is my gratitude. Now, I've never given a talk like this before. I've never talked about my personal embarkment on SIDS. And so I don't know how it's going to go over, and you have to bear with me, but I'm going to try to make you understand what inspired me and what me set this on this path. Now, the first slide, I think this is really a tale of two microscopes. I am a pediatric neuropathologist, and my career was based on love and passion for pathology and for the use of the light microscope that can magnify tissues and cells manyfold. I've also had an experience very early on with the electron microscope that is an upgrade, so to speak, of the light microscope and magnifies tissues and cells millions of times, and it was introduced in the 1930s. This is a story about my father and two microscopes. This is my father, Tom Kinney, and he was a pathologist at Duke University. He was the chairman of pathology at Duke for decades in the 1960s. And he inspired me to follow a career in medicine and in pathology. And he instilled in me a passion for these disciplines. Now, how did he do this? How does a parent or a mentor do this? He was my best and my first mentor. And how did he instill in me that desire to follow a scientific career? Well, it began when I was 11 years old. And he was chairman of the department, as I said. And he took me one Sunday afternoon. He said, Hannah, he was so excited. I was 11. He said, I want to show you something. And I said, okay. He said, we're going to my department and I'm going to show you something amazing. So we go to the department, we go down a long hall in the basement, because all pathology departments were in the basement then. And we go down a long hall, and in a little room, he turns on a light switch, and in the room is an electron microscope. And he says, there it is, Hannah. He said, that can blow up a bug to the size of a football field. And I kind of instantaneously said to myself, why would you want to do that? Bugs are scary enough as they are. Why would you want one that could chase after you? But it was his passion and his excitement and his love for knowledge and scholarship and for investigation that caught me. And he really brought me in and he excited me to do this. Now, let me tell you about pathology, because my father instilled in me in the same kind of ways a love of pathology. Pathology is derived from the Greek. It means pathos, which is suffering, and ology means the study of. So pathology is the study of suffering. And you can translate suffering into disease. And it's the way to study disease in cells and tissues under the microscope and with other tools to advance information around how diseases come about, how they progress, and how they are can have ways of treatment to them. And it was my father who told me that you can help mankind by pathology, that you can make advancements that would help mankind by the study of tissue diseases. And that inspired me because as long as I can remember, I've wanted to be a doctor, I think after my father, and I wanted to alleviate suffering. Now, I have to say that I was a child of the 60s. I was 10 years old when the 60s began, and was 20 years old when it ended in 10 years. I saw the Vietnam War played out on TV every night. I saw the women's movement play out. I saw the assassinations of King and Kennedy the Kennedys played out. And I saw the civil rights movement. This was the time that I grew up, was a formative period of my life in adolescence. And I saw suffering on the TV. It was broadcast, the Vietnam War, the civil rights movement, every night. And so I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be a pediatrician because I love children. And so I did a residency in pediatrics after medical school. And it's there where I had the transformative episode that sealed my link to the sudden infant death syndrome for a career following. I did my residency in pediatrics at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, CHOP. And there at CHOP, I, one night when I was a second-year resident, the residents covered the emergency room at night alone. And the nurses called me at 4 a.m. The sirens were screaming. Police officer came running into the treatment room. He had a baby, and the nurses said, dead on arrival. The baby is dead on arrival. And I started to do resuscitation with the anesthesiologist. At the door of the treatment room was the teenage Black mother and the teenage Black grandmother. The little boy had black curly hair, not a mark on his body. He was beautiful. And as I leaned down and was doing the resuscitation, the policeman, who was white, turned to me and said, they did it, Doc. And this was in the emergency room at CHOP. And he said, they did it, Doc. And this was in 1976. At that moment, everything in the 60s, my childhood with my father, culminated and crystallized in a moment into the desire to do SIDS research. And I said, if I ever do research in my career, I want it to be on sudden infant death syndrome. Now, I thought a lot about this episode. I thought about whether or not to tell you about it because it's shocking and it's sad, but it's the truth of the matter that put me on this pathway into SIDS research. And I would want to say to the police officers here that it's a different time today. It's a different, that was back then in inner city Philadelphia. That was a hard place to live. And what I was thinking is that the policemen that are here today represent the future. And I am so grateful to them for coming today, and law enforcement. I think this is an important part of the mission here because they are linked with the scientists and caretakers. And they are the future, and this problem shall be eradicated with the education that the police officers here today so nobly seek. So I want to thank you. So how did this coalesce? How did this come together in a moment? I've gone back to the Venn diagram, and it came as 4 overlapping circles that crystallized my interest in kids out of my experiences in the past. And there's a love of children, a passion for neuroscience, a commitment to justice and equality, and a desire to end or alleviate suffering. Now let me dissect apart this Venn diagram and tell you about each of these circles. I'll start with the love of children. And I really don't have to say anything about this because there's not a person in this room who isn't here because they don't love children. And so I'm not going to say anything more about that. We're all kindred spirits in our care for children. And then passion for neuroscience. Even then, I had an inkling that the brain was somehow involved with SIDS, even as a resident in pathology and as a resident in pediatrics. And I loved neuroscience. I had a mentor, mentors matter, and I had a mentor in medical school who was a neuroanatomy professor and taught me neuroanatomy, Betty Banker. And she was tremendous and charismatic, and she taught me to love the human brain and to want to study its intricacies and its beauty through my career. And this passion of neuroscience led to many collaborations with people in this room and outside this room and a program project that was funded for 20 years by the IDCSC. And in this project, we focused on the brainstem, which is the pons and the spinal medulla, which is the regions of the brain that control breathing and heart rate and temperature and vital functions and arousal. And the idea of the program project was that there was a developmental abnormality in the brainstem that resulted in sudden death related to a sleep period. in the principal project directors in that program project were Susan Dumicki at Harvard, Jean Natty at Yale, and George Richardson, Jean Natty at Dartmouth, George Richardson at Yale, who subsequently moved to Iowa. Now, it was in this program project that we had many postdocs in these laboratories that contributed to the work. And one of those people was this very eager and very bright and very astute postdoc named Russell Ray. And Russell Ray was in this laboratory, and he wrote and worked on the SIDS program project in Susan Dumicki's laboratory at Harvard before coming to Baylor. This is a seminal paper that Russell was first author on. It was in Science. And at the time that this paper was written, there was evidence, but it was not complete, that serotonin was involved in autonomic functions like breathing and heart rate and sleep. But Russell's contribution to this field was to use genetic modeling in animal models, where he acutely turned off and turned on serotonin. And in this mouse, when serotonin was turned off and it was inhibited, the animals had difficulty, as you can see, in body temperature and cardiorespiratory control. This was an iconic paper, and it speaks well for Russell's creativity, originality, and that he would become a leader. I kind of knew then, Russell, you'd be a leader, and I kind of figured that out during this period at Harvard. Now, I must mention Donna Armstrong, who is in my link and friend. Donna Armstrong was the pediatric neuropathologist at Texas Children's for decades. And she was, like me, as I said, a pediatric neuropathologist. And she and I worked together on a part of the brain called the hippocampus that had, I believe, abnormalities in it in SIDS brains. So how this went down was that, and this is, well, I should say first that this is a paper, the first paper that John and I wrote together about dentate gyrus abnormalities, which are in the hippocampus in unexplained death as a morphological marker of underlying brain vulnerability in SIDS. And Donna was a senior author, and I was the first author of this work, and we subsequently wrote multiple papers together. Now, how this came about was I would get many cases in consultation as a neuropathologist to study of SIDS cases, and medical examiners would send them to me, and pediatricians and others, and they would say, is the brain normal? And I began to notice in the hippocampus this lesion that has only been pathognomically associated with temporal lobe epilepsy. And it's called dentate gyrus bilamination or dysplasia. And I said, I don't know what this is. I think this is bilamination, but I'm going to call the world's expert on pediatric epilepsy and the pediatric brain. So I called up Donna and I said, Donna, who's at Baylor, at Texas Children's, is a friend of mine from the meetings. I said, Donna, I think I've got an abnormality here in the SIDS brains. Can I send it to you? And she said, sure, send the slides to me. I sent the slides to her and she said, Hannah, I agree. This is the lesion of temporal lobe epilepsy. And from there we went forward. I'm not going to talk about our work in the hippocampus this afternoon. I'm focused on the brainstem, but it was the beginning of a beautiful and wonderful collaboration. And I hope, Donna, that you're listening today. And this is a picture of Donna in her lab coat. Then there was, they came together in that split second at 4 a.m. in the emergency room, of commitment to justice and equality. And this led to my work in indigent populations with SIDS. In populations of SIDS, we know that SIDS occurs in a higher proportion of lower socioeconomic groups. And I became involved in being the neuropathologist for a consortium of the NICHD on studying SIDS in the Cape-colored, in Cape Town, South Africa, and the Northern Plains Indians in the Dakotas. And these two cohorts had the highest rates of SIDS in the world, much higher than that of white individuals. So I was involved in that from that interest in the lesser fortunate with SIDS. However, I have to say that there was also a desire to alleviate suffering and end suffering. SIDS does not just happen in the poor. It is a problem of the rich and the poor. It is a problem of the Black and the white. It is a problem of boys and girls of all ethnic groups. And I want to tell you a story that brought this home to me, that SIDS knows no privilege, and SIDS is not just restricted to the socially, economically disadvantaged. And that was with a mother who had a SIDS baby, and 20 years ago at the time, and told me she was upper class white. And she told me that after her 2-month-old daughter died of SIDS, every night she crawled into the baby's crib and got in the fetal position and grieved and could not get unfrozen. And that's when I knew SIDS is universal suffering, and it affects all. In all of this, I'd like to thank the working with Rich, because that desire to alleviate suffering and counseling extended into family with Rich Goldstein in 2012, the Roberts program. Rick is going to speak this morning, so he'll have an opportunity to tell us to you about what this comprehensive program is in bereavement counseling, and also in the review of autopsy cases with neuropathology and state-of-the-art genetics. So I'll leave that to Rick this morning. And I'd like to conclude by thanking all the multiple people that have helped me along the line. And there are even more than this. I put Robin Haynes' name in red, bold, because she has taken over and led the program at Children's Hospital SIDS with distinction. And she's here today, and she's going to give a talk this afternoon. It's a great honor for me to be here with Robin and to watch her take the lead in this. And so I'd just like to end with one final thought. And that comes from my Aunt Trania and Willa Cather's iconic textbook about the prairie. She wrote about happiness. SIDS has brought me great happiness, and let me tell you the reason how. it is because it's brought me immense satisfaction that I have been involved in a humanitarian mission that involves many, many people who are on the same pathway as us, as in this center and Robert's program, the SUGC program, and programs all over the country. And what comes to mind is a quote from Willa Cather, in which she said, happiness is to be immersed in something great. When it comes to one, it comes as naturally as sleep. Thank you.
Thank you so much for a beautiful lecture, Hannah.
You're welcome.
So I'd like to invite Savannah, Huda,